Good day, depending on where you are. It is I, the Desert Viking, come to you today with another exciting topic on what's been on my mind. This is the week 22 edition. So we've been going at this for about 22 weeks now. I've cleaned up the channel a little bit, taken some videos down, kept some up. Today, we are going to discuss trauma and how it actually rewires your neurology. So, I went back to college, and my goal here in going back to college is to finalize a couple more degrees. This is one of my, as I'm getting older, starting over in a field that I'm brand new at by myself in today's world where inflation and everything has run amok. Starting out at about $18 an hour is not really something I want to do. And AI is posed to take a lot of jobs. That's one of the reasons why it's being created. I sat through some management meetings late last year and early this year, where their stated goals for those companies were the removal of at least half of their development staff to replace with AI if they could. So, the next 5 years or so, in my field, the technical field, they're expecting most developers to not have a job anymore, and programming is basically going to be a hobby. That's their goal. Whether they achieve this goal or not, I don't know. They've tried this before. It failed. This is, they're dumping billions of dollars into AI to remove these jobs for a reason. It's going to save them a whole ton of money. So that puts someone like me in a bad position. So this was one of the reasons given to me for my engagement ending. The actual quote was, "It's not fair that I have to be the one that makes the most money," which typically women don't. Women want their men to make more than them, substantially more than them. So because my career is threatened, that was one of the excuses given to end an engagement. So what I did was I went back to school. I'm basically doubling down. Technical jobs aren't going to 100% disappear, but the people that have them will be, they will hold high-end degrees. That will be the gatekeeping. So I'm going to be one of those people because I've sunk 30 years into my career to just switch over to some trade job making not enough money to even live out of my car. Anyhow, so part of that degree is melding my psychology background with tech, machine learning, and doing a lot of work on trauma lately, which coincides with my personal journey, going through betrayal and abandonment trauma from an engagement being broken. So if you're not familiar with this book, this is a really good book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. If you're going through something similar or you're curious about trauma and its effects on the body, this is a good book. When I did my first set of degree work, I don't know, over 20 years ago, the trauma portions we talked about mainly dealt with PTSD in terms of combat veterans, war veterans, or people who had experienced violence of some type, a violent act. Because those are, we understand that those inflict trauma and how to deal with that type of trauma. We have advanced since then to recognize other types of trauma and the effects that it can have on you, not just mentally, but physically. It can physically alter your body. So this will be a little bit of a difficult talk because I'm going to explain some of my exposure to trauma from my own perspective, having lived through several different types of trauma, and what it does to try if you've not experienced it, or maybe you're experiencing something similar, to relate to what you're going through. One of the things that I dislike so heavily about our culture is that we have this propensity to say, if I can't see the damage being done, then it doesn't really exist, and you should just get over it. If you go through trauma, it's one of the things that trauma people are told a lot is you just need to learn to get over it. The problem is that trauma itself is is a physical injury. I would consider it a physical injury in many cases because it does rewire your brain and your nervous system physically. It alters it. And so think about if you've ever been cut or burned or had a broken bone, an injury, a physical injury. You know that when it heals, it leaves behind a scar. Same too with trauma. When you go through trauma, it will leave a scar. Now, if you are subjected to repeated trauma, that is akin to being burned over and over again. If you were physically burned over and over again, it will still heal, but that scar tissue is going to be larger and more pronounced. It's the same thing with dealing with mental trauma. If you're subjected to mental trauma over and over again, yes, you can heal from it, but the scar tissue will always remain. You can never fully remove trauma from someone's life. This is why, to me, inflicting trauma on someone should be taken a lot more seriously than it is. Because it is akin to physically injuring that person. It's just that because people can't see it, they treat it like, well, I can't see it, so therefore it doesn't exist. Therefore, you just need to get over it. Trauma causes all kinds of different issues. We call it being triggered. I live in a trauma loop right now. And even with past traumas that in some cases are over 40 years old, I still remember them to this day, and they still influence my life 40 years later. These things, not only are they not fun, they make getting through life a lot more difficult than it needs to be. But there's not really a good outlet. Now, therapists will try to talk, through this kind of thing. And therapy is great to an extent. Talk therapy, especially for me, is useful because I like to talk out my thoughts because my brain is constantly cycling. It's stuck in a trauma loop. And so being able to verbalize to someone else helps. The problem with therapy, maybe it's not a problem, but the shortcoming of therapy is that I see therapy a lot like prostitution in that you have hired someone and paid them money to listen to you. But there's not really a connection to that person. They don't have any deep connection to you. In the end, you're just a client, and they're going to go home when you're done, and it doesn't impact them. So you're able to vocalize the issue, but you're not doing so with someone who actually cares. They're going to tell you they care, but really there's not really a good personal connection I have found in my life. Like you're paying someone to listen to you talk. So that lack of connection stunts therapy a little bit, at least for me, because I need to have that personal connection that doesn't exist. So different types of trauma do different types of things. None of them should be taken lightly, is really the bottom line of this video. No type of trauma should be taken lightly, and inflicting trauma should be seen as more serious and not as the trivial thing it is today. Today, when we inflict trauma on people, it's rewarded and celebrated, which is disgusting. But that is what it is. So part of doing these videos is just to maybe make you think a little bit before you choose an action that is going to lead someone down the route of perpetual trauma. Hi, Owen. He says hi. Maybe you heard that. He's talkative today. A lot of people have asked, as we're on week 22. I'm coming up on 6 months. Hey, you should be ready to start dating again and get over it. I will not date anyone right now. I will not date anyone until I have taken care of my physical body, first of all, just because I have a very bad history of being left because of my body and having that being used as an excuse. So to me, trying to date when you're not, you don't have yourself physically put together is useless, because even if you find someone, as soon as someone who's physically better than you shows up, they're going to leave. That's how my brain works. But that's how I observe and see this with a lot of people. That's just, again, it's our culture, and I would I would you know gladly debate anyone who thinks otherwise. But that's been pretty much my full experience. But second, I wouldn't try to date anyone right now because I am stuck in this trauma loop. And what a trauma loop is every day I relive the day she left over and over again, multiple times. And it's not because I'm choosing to relive it. It's not because I'm like waking up going, man, I can't wait to think about this again. It just, it replays itself over and over and over in my head. It replays itself over and over at night when I lay there and try to sleep. I still don't sleep very well because that's all my brain thinks about. Things related to that. That's a trauma loop. So it's like a record. If I'm trying to match it up to something for you, it's like a record. So if you're young, you may not remember what records are, but an album, there's a little needle that goes on the record as it spins and it plays music. And if that record became physically damaged in some way, the needle would skip and repeat itself because it couldn't get over that wound in the record. That's a trauma loop. The trauma loop is at the moment of trauma. Basically, the wires, the connectors in your brain they've shorted out right there, because what you thought was real is not real, or whatever the event is, has burned an injury into the neurology up there, and your brain can't figure it out. And so it basically keeps cycling back to it to try to figure it out, to try to overcome it, and it can't. The brain is an electrical device, and the neurological pathways are like wires. So when that physiology is altered, you've created a new pathway in your brain. So it's not like you can just choose to overcome that. It is physically been rewired to exist this way. And this is why these trauma loops, because living it over and over and over again, is very painful, because you're reliving that moment over and over again. It stops you from being able to do pretty much anything, depending on what trauma we're talking about. It can stop you from being able to work. It can stop you from being able to concentrate. It can stop you from anything, because you just want to focus on that. It's like being kicked in the balls over and over again, or being stabbed over and over again. You're reliving that over and over again. And people who've suffered violence, they have these same loops where they feel themselves being attacked over and over again. And over time, it does kind of heal itself, but it'll always be there. And while I'm stuck in that trauma loop, I couldn't possibly try to date anyone, even if I had my body in shape, because my brain's not going to be there. And I don't know that it ever will. Honestly, this one was really bad. I don't know that it will ever be fully recovered enough to want to explore anything with anyone else, because that trust has been shattered. And what do I mean by that? I said there's different types of trauma. So my first brush with trauma, I mentioned, I still remember trauma from 40 years ago. I was physically beaten as a child. And when I say beaten, I mean beaten. We had welts on our back and our legs from being beaten with anything you can think of was probably used. My personal favorite was the big rubber extension cord, electrical extension cord. It's a big rubber. Yeah, that thing really hurt. But then as we got older, so I was like a 5 or 6 year old boy, and I was told, you're bad, and you're going to be beaten. And I still remember to this day the light socket being flicked on it in the middle of the night, and that voice telling me to get out of bed, and then being beaten because I'd left my toys out, or I had been a 5 or 6 year old boy and did something I was insolent, so I'd be beaten for it, enough to leave welts. And I remember being told, "Don't take your shirt off when you're outside playing," because no one wanted to see they didn't want the bruises to be seen. So that was physical trauma. That was being attacked, and what that trauma, I still remember that to this day. I still remember the sound of the light switch being flicked on. I still remember that feeling of helplessness, because when you're 5 or 6 years old, you don't have any. There's nothing you can do, right? A grown adult man is beating the shit out of you. There's nothing you can do as a 5 or 6 year old boy. And so what that has manifested itself in my life. This is one of the reasons why I investigated psychology as a degree years ago, because I wanted to understand myself more. And how that manifests in my life to this day and will until I die is I have to have control over my life and at all things because of that helpless feeling that I felt. I don't ever want to feel that again. So I have to have full control over everything I do, which can be troublesome, and it can lead to conflict with other people. And I'm aware of this, and you can try to move around it, but that's a problem. Um, that manifested itself also later on in life. My mother decided she left that person, which is fine. But then she chose she didn't want to work, so she lived off the state. We lived in state housing, in cockroach housing. We were homeless for a year, so I lived in a tent, and I had really, really bad acne. And that really, really bad acne was so bad, like I used to have to go to the doctor and have acid treatments. It was disgusting. But that was 6 years of my life, from junior high all the way to graduation, where I was physically disfigured, basically, with this acne. And what that did, being super poor and having this acne, well, my social status was very low, like almost to the bottom. And so because of that, this is how I became an introvert. I became an introvert because I had to learn to do things alone, because no one wanted to do anything with me, because once you get into junior high and high school, there's that social order. No one wants to associate with the people who aren't high up in the social rank, because that affects their social status. And so before I grew into my body, every day coming home was a fight, really. I would be chased home and fought, because I used to walk home from school. And I had to learn how to fight at a young age. And so I got really good at fighting. And once I got bigger than them, because I'm not small, and I'm bigger than the average man, once I grew into my size, they stopped picking on me, because I started punching them harder than they could punch me. But that was a type of trauma. And then I've lived through 2 engagements in a marriage that were broken because of my body, because I was not as physically fit as this guy that would showed up. So my marriage ended through many affairs. She had many affairs and 2 engagements. So that's all betrayal and abandonment trauma. And in relaying all this stuff to you is not to say, "Oh, boo-hoo, my life is hard." It's to try to establish some type of empathetic connection, to understand where my trauma comes from, and why I'm trying to relate this. The abandonment trauma and the betrayal trauma does not fully heal. You can get to a point where you can live and you can work and function as a person, but you're always looking at the back of your head, because essentially what's going on is, in all your relationships, the back of your brain is constantly active, because it's looking for danger at all times. And it's very exhausting. It is super exhausting. I can't even describe it. And this is why people who go through trauma often end up on drugs or alcohol, because the drugs and alcohol quiet that noise in the head so that they can rest. Obviously, though, taking drugs and alcohol is destructive and is not the answer to getting over that either. It's really hard to say what the answer is. And some people will claim to have one. You have to go through all this therapy and work on it and so forth. And that'll get you so far. It will. But you never, ever forget the ghosts of those things. Your brain does not forget. You have been physically rewired. The neurology has been rewired every time you go through an injury. So if you've gone through multiple injuries, it's like being burned multiple times. That scar is very large, and you're going to remember it for the rest of your life. This is why we should not trivialize people disposing of others like garbage. We should not feel that it's okay for someone to do this type of thing and say, well, they're just doing what they had to do to live their best life. Whatever it takes for you to live your best life, you do that. This is what our society preaches. And the problem is it's at whatever cost. If it costs someone else, so be it. They're losers. The damage that causes people is as bad as shooting someone or stabbing someone. It's just that you can't see it. So because you can't see it, you just figure that's their problem. I didn't actually see blood and I didn't actually shoot them. So I didn't do anything wrong. I just did what's right for me. Carelessness has consequences. And in our society, we are broken people making more broken people. And we're okay with that. And we shouldn't be okay with that. And so I would like you to stop and consider the next time that maybe you have this decision. Are you setting someone up to fail or fall? Are you telling someone things that you know aren't true that's building them up when you know you could just dip out of their life and leave at a moment's notice and destroy that person? Because if the answer is yes, you may want to reconsider what you're doing. You may want to reconsider letting it get as far as you may be letting it go. If you have suffered betrayal trauma and you have gone through this loop, I don't have any real words of wisdom. Because nothing I say is going to soothe that or stop that trauma loop that you're going through. I don't. If I had a way to do it, I would have done it to myself a long time ago to shut my brain up. I don't have the answers. I can just say stay strong. And if hopefully you have friends and family that love you that you can connect with and they can help. If you're alone, which a lot of us are, you have to find a purpose in your life. That's really what keeps me afloat, is finding a purpose in my life. So giving back to the community, trying to be an example for those who have suffered similar things, trying to help people who are in need, where I can help, serving in kitchens, doing toy drives, anything really that can help. Those give you a purpose. They've given me a purpose. They've helped me to step beyond myself. I think that's the key. Make my life more than just me. If all your life is you, then these situations can hurt a lot more, I think. If your life is about helping others and there's another purpose in life, then the trauma and the damage that you've suffered will never be gone, but becomes second seat to what's really important, which is your purpose. That would be my advice, as much as I can give. So, week 22, trauma rewires neurology, physically alters yourself, physically alters others when you inflict these type of wounds on them. Now, bearing in mind, sometimes people make their own choices and you have to leave, or so, because a lot of people will take what I just said and say, well, you're just saying it. If you leave someone and it hurts them, you shouldn't leave them, which is wrong because they could be abusing you, and all that's true. All that's true. I've had to make difficult choices where I had to leave someone because just things weren't lining up, or they had crossed my boundaries one too many times and I just couldn't continue to let them do that, but that hurt them when I left. Life is never black and white. There's never a black and white answer. There's always shades of gray that you have to navigate through. But there should never be to me, when it comes to relationships, an answer to someone when you leave should never be, I was never attracted to you. because that relationship should never have happened in the first place. Certainly, you should never have let them buy you a house, engagement rings, a wedding, all this other stuff, and then go, well, yeah, it's just not working. If you're not attracted to someone, you know you're not attracted to them. There's no question. So don't let it get that far. That's what I got for week 22. Thank you for listening. If you like the content, like and subscribe. I will see you next time. Until then, cheers.